Hi there, welcome to Code Framer. In this video, I will talk about a very important concept in list data type, that is list comprehension. I highly recommend you to watch all the videos related to list data type, so that you become completely aware about all the methods and functions that are used to operate on Python lists. Before understanding about list comprehensions, there are two extremely important questions which must be answered. First is, what is a list comprehension? Second is, when should we not use list comprehension? As list comprehensions can be very tempting, especially when you are very much familiar with it, sometimes we may use it in places where we must go with other alternative solutions. So, after giving answers to these questions, we will start coding in Jupyter Notebook, to explore the functionality of list comprehensions. So, let us start with the first question, what is a list comprehension? List comprehension is an elegant and optimized way of defining or creating a list. So whenever we write a for loop, in order to create a list, or make modification in an existing list, it usually takes multiple lines of code. Also when we use conditional statements inside a looping statement, then it further takes more lines of code to implement the logic, but using list comprehension, we can write all of this in a single line of code. It not only improves the readability of the code, but it also makes the code optimized. Earlier, lambda and map expressions were used to implement for loops in a single line of code, but now list comprehensions are preferred. If you have a question why is it so? Then a simple answer to this question is, because of the readability aspect, the list comprehension makes the code look extremely self-explanatory, which tempts the developers to go for list comprehensions instead of lambda or map expressions. Now let us have a look at how a list comprehension expression looks like. First we need to write the expression, then we can start the for loop, by writing for, followed by item, which denotes the representation of the members in the list, and then we can give the name of the list. Believe it or not, it is as simple as that. We can also write conditional statements inside a list comprehension statement. The expression of a list comprehension, along with the conditional statement looks like this. First is the expression, and then the for loop starts, items, the list name, and then we can provide the conditional, if, statement. The interpreter will check the conditional statement on each iteration of the for loop. If the condition holds true, then the expression will be executed, else, the interpreter will skip the expression, and move to the next loop iteration. But remember one thing, if you want to write an if-else block in list comprehension, then the statement will be expression, then if statement, then else statement, and then the for loop starts, then items, and finally the name of the list. As you can see here, the list comprehension makes the code look extremely readable and simple for the developer to understand. Also, in a normal for loop, you need to create an empty list, then run the for loop to update the items and so on. But using list comprehensions, we can completely focus on the logic, and leave the rest for the interpreter to create basic resources to create the list. These are the main advantages of the list comprehensions, by the way. I hope that this is clear. Now the next question that we have is, when should we not use list comprehensions? List comprehensions are not a good choice in some of the cases. We must avoid using list comprehensions on nested loops. It will make the code look not readable. Using list comprehensions on nested loops may lead to confusion, and also in future it will be difficult for other developers to understand the statement. Hence, for nested loops, it is always good to go with the usual for loop. Secondly, list comprehensions are not good for large numbers of iterations. This is because, the list comprehension statement stores or creates the entire list items into the memory, and due to which memory management of your system may get impacted, and sometimes the entire system may crash, if the values are too high for it to handle. So, to run a large number of iterations, we must go for a generator instead. I will explain about Python generators in a separate video, but for now just know that, the generator does not create the entire list in the memory, but instead, it generates an iterable object. Later we can loop through this object, in order to access the list items. In this way, without storing the entire list in memory, the generator can produce the values when requested. This will have a lesser footprint on the memory. Don't worry about generators too much right now. We will see the example of this, while coding in Jupyter Notebook in the next video. I promise it will be crystal clear once you look at the example. For now, it is sufficient for you to understand that, it is always better to go for generators for large numbers of iterations. Third and last point is, whenever you think that the code readability is getting a hit because of the expression, then it is always good to go for the usual for loop, and avoid using list comprehensions. Well, this is just a generic rule, which developers can decide when they are coding. Having understood these concepts, I think we are good to go to the Jupyter Notebook, and start some coding to explore list comprehensions. For example, if you want to find a list of squared numbers for a range of 20 numbers, then with the usual for loop, we need to first create an empty list, for example, number_list. And then we can write, for, item, in range, round brackets, and inside the round brackets we can write, 20. The range function simply accepts an integer value as an argument, and it will create a list of values, from 0 to the integer value in the argument. In this case, the range function will create values from 0 to 20. Finally we can give the colon, and in the next line with indentation, we can write, result, equals, item multiplied by item. This will store the squared value of the item, in the result variable. And in the next line, we can write, number_list, dot, and then we can call the append method, then inside the round brackets, we can pass, result. With this for loop, the squared numbers of all the numbers in the range of 20 numbers, will be appended to the number_list. As you can see, we have written multiple lines of code to achieve the desired result. For such cases, you can always go for list comprehension. So let's try to achieve the same result using list comprehension. A list comprehension statement can be started by writing a square bracket, and then inside the square bracket we can write the resultant expression, which is item multiplied by item, and then we can start the for loop by writing for, and then the member in the for loop, which is item, and then the iterable list, which is range of 20. And finally the closed square bracket. As you can see, it prints all the squared numbers for numbers between 0 to 20. Similarly, an existing list with certain items can be modified using list comprehension. For example, if we want to modify items of a list of strings, then we can use the replace method inside list comprehension. For example, we have a list called string_list, which contains certain string items. In order to replace all the string B to C, we can write square brackets, item, dot, replace, round brackets, and inside the round brackets we can pass the arguments, so the first argument is B, and the second argument is C, and then we can write for, item, in, and then the name of the list, which is string_list. So, as you can see in the result, all the string items B are now replaced with string item C. This is how we can use list comprehensions to make modifications in a list. I hope that is clear. To keep the video length in control, I will stop now, but in the next video, I will show more examples of list comprehensions, so that you start feeling comfortable using it. I highly recommend you to practice a few basic looping statements with list comprehensions. I hope that this video was helpful for you to understand list comprehension. If you like this video, then hit the like button, share it with other code lovers, and subscribe to CodeFramer, to master programming languages. I will see you in the next video, and until then, happy learning.